Thank you for joining Retail Tech Revolution by CBTS. Today, we'll be talking about reliability and security and networking. I'm the producer, Lance Hart, and I'm joined by Justin Rice and John Lloyd. Justin, let's jump right in.
All right. Thanks, Lance. John, welcome again to another episode of Retail Tech Revolution. Like Lance said, we're going to talk about reliability and security and networking today. A lot of the times when we have these conversations, we're talking about stuff like unified experience down at the store level, the introduction of AI into the customer experience or personalization journey. Today, we're going to step back a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of the infrastructure, specifically around reliability and security, to make all those other things happen. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the trends, what we see retailers doing today, the trends of the future, and we're going to take another layer down than we normally do today. So let's start first to talk about why. Why is security and networking so important to the store, down to the store level?
Yeah, so let's start with the networking side. Security, obviously, it's important, but I think everybody kind of knows it's important. Think about at your home or in an office, right? You come in every day, you go to your desk. Point being, you have this static environment that if something's not working, you notice it right away, and you reach out to your help desk right away.
Yep.
Now do that in a retail store. You're not sitting there obviously there's a manager's office, but you get my point. You're out on the floor with your handheld. And it's different. It's dynamic every day. So if something's not working or it's running slow, you have different employees working different shifts. You're doing different things throughout the store. It's a lot harder to find and track that issue, but it becomes a nagging issue. You also are probably less likely to have that employee report it in, but they're talking about it in the store for sure, right?
Yep.
Now, maybe if you're in a smaller, like a fast food or a fast casual like restaurant, that's smaller teams. I'm thinking big box store, right?
Yep.
So the network is so important because it enables everything you do, from security cameras to the customer experience on wireless to Internet of Things and where the retail industry is going around technology. Security, everybody understands the importance, and we'll talk through how to best deploy that security. I think networking often gets overlooked at how much of a headache it can cause.
Yeah.
And a headache in one store, if you have 500 locations, you got 500 headaches, right? It's not that simple.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's your self-checkout kiosks. It is your POS servers. It is your smart shelving. It's your cameras. Everything relies on the network. And when we talk about network, we're talking about the Wi-Fi. Obviously, We're talking about the switches, and we're talking about the routers, and then kind of the edge device, the SD-WAN, or the firewall that exists out there. So that stack becomes such a necessary component to whatever you're trying to adopt as a retailer.
And what's the impact to a store now versus 10 years ago of that network being down? And we're focusing a lot on the network in the store. What about the network outside the store? Because the applications aren't living all the time in the store. So what's the impact if an internet circuit goes down? And what's the cost, right? You mentioned SD-WAN.
Yeah.
In the past, a retailer would have an MPLS link. That's expensive times 500 sites, 1,000 sites, 2,000 sites. So we want internet. It's higher bandwidth. It's lower cost. It also doesn't carry the SLAs and things like that. So how do we design for that uptime? And then, the idea of SD-WAN, anything software defined, cloud networking in general, not having to log into each switch, being able to go from a interface, a GUI, a website, and be able to make administrative changes, profiles, templates. So the world of networking has gotten a lot easier to administer for retailers. However, the importance of it and the impact of it not performing at its peak is far greater.
Yeah, it's tenfold. Yeah, I mean, a couple things that we talk about with retailers often is, what is the risk of being down? And what is your kind of time horizon where things start to get really bad? The other is really scalability. I think certainly in the macroeconomic environment, we have seen retailers say, listen, I really need the ability technically to be able to bring on new stores or shut stores down in a relatively quick fashion. I want to make it easier on my business to not have all of the technical debt or the management overhead to deal with that fluidity. So I think to your point about SD-WAN, I'm going to touch on the cloud networking trends in general. There's a lot of platforms out there that exist today that help deal with those things.
I think also network is further and different now. We have a lot of customers that are fast casual food. They need great wireless for their drive-through because they have people out with handhelds taking orders, helping, reduce friction. Yep. You want to go to, if you have two competitors next to each other, you want to go to the one that you're going to get through the line the fastest and with the correct order, right? Yep. So what are some of the technologies that are enabled, whether it's, seeing your order on a screen or a digital ordering board to, faster checkout because somebody's got a wireless handheld? Then extend that into, so that's kind of a fast casual. We also have a lot of customers in the gas and convenience store space. Yeah. That's a wildly different need as well. When I go to get gas, don't get in your car, right? Because you can carry the electricity. Don't get back in your car when you pump. And so you see smart pumps with entertainment and TVs on them now. A lot of IoT sensors collecting data off of the fuel pumps and things like that, which is still a different experience from then I walk into the store and what is my, to get my coffee and I've got my rewards card. Or think of a parking lot. Now security cameras are wireless. And so we're starting to see the need for the network expand beyond just the brick and mortar four walls. Yeah. And that can be a big challenge.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So as a retailer, with our experience in talking with retailers of every single, segment of retail that we work with, what are some of those key decisions that we see retailers making or considering whenever they're thinking about networking? To me, what comes to mind is, okay, I need a flexible consumption model. I need a provider to be able to have some capital version, some operating expense version of whatever I'm going to buy from a networking perspective. But even more than that, with the topic of this talk is around the reliability of that. Always on networking has to be a thing. Yep. Just like your power or just like your water, it needs to be always on networking. So I guess my question to you, John, is what are the other considerations that you see retailers making when it comes to networking technology?
We call it the 3 Ps: people, yeah. Process, progress. Yeah. If you have the right people following the right process, you'll make the progress that you're looking for. It's a logistics thing. It's, a repetitive task having to be done over and over. Retailers are, let's say a retail on average is open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then you have your after hours maintenances or troubleshooting. There's people still in the store doing inventory, shelving, things like that. It's not an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And by the way, your busy times, your most important times, your revenue making times tend to be Friday after 5 o'clock through, Sunday evening when most places are running on skeleton crew or things like, or your employees have families, their IT staff doesn't want to sit there on call. So that's a huge challenge we see. And then what happens when a switch or an access point does go down? I'm distributed. Maybe I'm sitting at home. That store is, 1,000 miles away from me. How do we build out the people and the process to be able, and that's a big part that CBTS plays with our retail customers, is helping deliver on that piece of the network. It's not just, is it up or down? It's when it's down, what do I do and how do I do it? Because it's not going to go down on Tuesday at noon when I'm sitting here working, right? It's going to be after hours. It's going to be on the weekends. It's going to be somewhere far from my house. And we help fill that gap. The second piece is the refresh life cycle. Technology doesn't last for 10 years, right? I think Wi-Fi 6 was out for a month before 6E was the new talk of the town. So how are you going to refresh that? And to your point, some years it might be a capital focus. Other years you might be operational expense. And as the markets change and your business changes. And so having a consumption model option, having a capital option, and then having to go deploy it, right? Having to go out on site, having to 40-foot ceilings and scissor lifts to put APs in. It is not easy. And so I think really what we bring to the table when we work with retailers is the people and the process, because you just can't scale.
Yeah, it almost sounds like before you make a platform decision, let's take a step back and say, okay, what are my people goals? What are my process goals? Now let's pick a technology that may help support those goals. It's not the technology first.
And believe it or not, if you're not in the IT side of retail, your stores do not want to be touched, every year with you coming in and running new wires and putting in new they want the latest, greatest, but also they want to be left alone to do the function of the store. They don't want to be interrupted with IT all the time. And so kind of looking at that future-proof networking, working with a partner that can help monitor your store, help troubleshoot your store remotely. All of those are things that help the store function and do what it's supposed to, which is stay up and running and produce revenue.
Yeah. I think I want to step through some of the technology specifics here, because I think things have changed so rapidly in the networking space over the years. When you and I started working with retailers a number of years ago, MPLS was such a heavy footprint in retailers. You had 500 sites, you had 1,000 sites. It didn't matter. You had an MPLS network that supported that environment, that had a hub location that all of your traffic routed back to, because that's where your application workload was. Yep. But now what we're seeing is, one, SD-WAN took over 5 or 6 years ago. We had applications now moving everywhere. So the network, the wide area network, has changed drastically. So talk to me about where we are today in the SD-WAN landscape, and then bring the security conversation forward a little bit around SASE and what you're seeing there.
So the first thing, think about the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Think about when the MPLS days, you had a point of sale running on a Linux box.
Yep.
You had some handheld scanners. Maybe you had just a hypervisor running locally at the store that would batch to your data center at the end of the day. I mean, the functions were very, very limited. They were very simple, what it took to run a retail store from the network standpoint. Now think about going into a retail store. The bandwidth needs around self-checkouts, being able to, you put in a code and it's got pictures of the produce that you're buying to make sure that's your point of sale now, not just a beep, beep, through the Linux box. I've got wayfinding built into my app. Well, that app's not running in the store, right? But the beacons are, right? The wayfinding is. So all of these people that are walking through the store with the app to, find the right location of an inventory item. You think about the IoT connected devices, smart shelving, all of those things in fashion. You see kind of digital wardrobes where you can kind of try on different looks and these things. So bandwidth is what has driven I can't do MPLS. It's so expensive, but I couldn't sacrifice uptime. So when I went to a broadband provider, that's great that I got a 200 meg circuit for a fraction of what my 10 meg MPLS was. But what happens when it goes down? And that's where you start to see it gets supplemented with SD-WAN being the overlay, where go and bring multiple transports. Maybe it's 2 broadband links. Maybe it's broadband and LTE. Now 5G is a big piece that we are starting to see. Where I've got this kind of always on connectivity. I've got higher bandwidth. I've got the reliability, and SD-WAN helps enable that. However, I now need to protect and secure it. And so in the MPLS days, it was a private link that came back to my data center, and I had a firewall there, right?
Yep.
Well, we went to SD-WAN, and we brought all these internet connections in. Now we've got to start talking about the security there. And so it's expensive to go and deliver, this growing footprint of 1,000 firewalls, however many sites you have. So SASE has come along. And what SASE has enabled me to do is, one, kind of go back to this follow the sun model, subscribe to throughput of a firewall. I have stores on the East Coast that are closed while the West Coast is operating. So I'm kind of paying a consumption model with SASE. I'm paying for throughput. I'm paying for what's getting utilized. I'm tunneling all of my traffic securely, or at least the traffic I want, right? Maybe guest Wi-Fi locally. But my corporate traffic, I'm securely encrypting and tunneling it from my SD-WAN edge at the site to a SASE, a secure access service edge in the cloud. So the first thing I'm doing is kind of getting me back to that MPLS world where I took everything back to a centralized firewall. The difference is that centralized firewall, it was hardware based. You had to expand it. You had to upgrade it. You had to take maintenance windows. And when new features were available, you had to go buy a new box to go and get those new features, or your performance would be degraded if you turned it on the existing box. So what SASE enables me to do is keep that centralized firewall, but pay at a consumption model. So I can kind of follow the sun as my stores open. I start paying. As they close, I stop for that throughput. I share that throughput across it. But also as new features come out, I can just add them in. I don't have to replace everything and take a big maintenance window. So SASE has really enabled retailers to stay at the leading edge of security without, the the pain or headache it used to be.
Yeah, whenever you say something like, SASE enabled us to have more of this follow the sun model with security, I think you're spot on. And the fact that threats are pervasive more than ever. Yep. And to have the ability for that cloud firewall now to get upgraded, basically take it out of your hands of worry, I think is a big deal. It's interesting because I think I've seen a lot of retailers either have adopted some sort of SD-WAN technology or they are, considering it heavily. I think the next evolution now is you add SASE to that to really have a full bundled solution. And I think, we're going to see that over the next 12, 18, 24 months. The SASE is going to be the dominant conversation around store networking.
I think a big driver to that is there used to be retailers built their own apps.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
Your own inventory, your own point of sale. And now there's a lot of really great options. Think about like Toast in the food vertical, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure they probably have handheld scanners that probably expand beyond that, but that's where I'm familiar with Toast.
You're right.
In the restaurant space. You're starting to see these kind of purpose-built, vertical-specific SaaS applications. So that's starting to change a lot about where I need to network, what my attack surface is, where things are coming in, where I need to protect them. Also, with this distributed landscape, let's say I've got, I'm in every time zone across the US and I've got Europe. Oh, well, you should probably have 4 different data centers minimum, right? And that's 4 different firewalls. With SASE, you click a button and you have access to 100 data centers across the country in real time, right? That distributed security model, that distributed posture. We talk with non-retail customers, right? Like business office customers. And we talk about people can live and work anywhere now. Obviously, that's not the same in retail. But the second part of that phrase of people can live and work anywhere is applications now can also live anywhere. And that is still very applicable to retail.
Yeah, you're right. We've talked so far about kind of the WAN connectivity around the SD-WAN, bringing in SASE and kind of an elevated security posture. Let's take that back down to the local area side and let's talk about the connectivity of client devices specifically. So I think what we've seen, to your point about what you have asked the network to do, has changed over time. The local device connectivity needs to be some sort of wireless connectivity for handheld scanners or your smart shelving or IoT sensors. What do you see on the LAN side, wireless, LTE, 5G? Yep. Where's that going?
So the first is obviously there's security, .1x, right? Authentication, right? That you're not putting in a password into everybody's handheld scanner. So you obviously need that. But think about it, whether you want to or not. Think about the next time you're in a retail, like you see handhelds kind of like left on a shelf, or maybe they're left on with somebody's doing image. Yeah. They're accessible to people, right?
Yeah.
I get they probably shouldn't be, but the reality is they are. So how do we design, least privilege access, making sure that if somebody were to pick that up, what can they get to? What could they access? How do we segment the network? So zero trust network access is still a huge component. Think about onboarding and offboarding. Retail tends to have seasonal fluctuations, maybe higher turnover rate with some entry-level jobs, part-time jobs, things like that. So what's my identity access management, identity access governance? So those are the things in the store that the network has to be looking at. How do we securely connect to it? Beyond this, okay, I've connected with .1x authentication. You've got me set up with zero trust networking and the network is segmented, so I'm safe there. The employee you've protected with identity access management, single sign-on, those sorts of tools. The next becomes, what about the sensors, the Internet of Things, all of the things that are popping up and growing that need really low latency or maybe need better coverage than was currently out and deployed. And that's where we're starting to see 5G, private 5G, CBRS, citizen band radio services, that private connectivity starting to take over. Those handheld scanners not connecting to wireless, not getting out to the quote unquote traditional public internet, using private 5G, low latency. And we're seeing the network now have a need to build basically a little mini data center in each store to be able to handle all of the compute and the transactions. So edge compute stack is where I think a lot of retailers need to be focusing on their network in the now and into the near future.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a now conversation to be relevant moving forward. We've talked a lot about the fabric of the environment so far, but what we haven't really touched on is, and where we're seeing a huge uptick in conversations, is around just the patch management of all the things out there, whether that's the compute stack, the network stack, client devices. Patch management is becoming a really big deal in the retail sector.
Yeah. So think about a retail store. Everything's a computer connected to the internet.
Yeah.
You may not think about it that way, but your point of sale is a computer connected to the internet.
Yeah.
That handheld scanner is a computer connected to the internet. Obviously, you have like actual computers as well. And so patching becomes wildly important. And those are things that typically patching is repetitive. It has to happen every month. You've got a lot of locations, a lot of devices. You've got a lot of kind of sometimes unique operating systems that can be a challenge in point of sale. We do a lot of patching as a service. It is a huge vulnerability point for retail customers. Let's start with that. Retail customers are the #1 target.
Totally.
If I'm a bad actor, you have people's credit card info, right? Like, also you've got a lot of attack points because of how many locations retailers tend to have. So understand you're constantly under attack, probably more so than any other vertical. And a bad patch, that can be a huge weakness. So
let me interrupt this thought real quick, because I am curious. I know that what we see in other retailers a lot of times is their kind of fail patch rate is pretty extreme. So tie that into the part of this conversation.
So when we do patching as a service, we offer a 95% SLA.
Yeah.
We will successfully patch 95% of your devices. Now, there obviously are the caveats to, like, well, some devices can't be patched, but we give you that report. Why can't it be patched? You don't have enough memory, right? You need to upgrade. So it's not my fault we didn't patch it, but you're also getting that insight as to why. The bigger reason is, like I said, it's tedious, it's repetitive.
Yeah.
It takes the point of sale offline to restart while you patch it. It's just kind of an out of sight, out of mind. It's not something that is part of a retail store doing its business. And so we typically see 40-50% successful patch rate in retail. We're offering a 95% SLA, and I think we're, as of last year, I think we're averaging like something 97.1% as that success rate. So it's a huge impact, and it gets it off your plate. Nobody enjoys doing patching every Patch Tuesday.
Yeah, right. And when you say patching, I mean that's the servers, the compute stack, the networking, kind of across the board. It's all important.
Yeah, it's internet connected devices.
Yeah, very good. Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about just the monitoring of devices, both network and end user devices out there. That seems, I kind of lump that into the network and security conversation, as the platform is only as good as what you can monitor and what you could take action on.
Yeah.
So where do you see kind of monitoring at today and into the future?
We kind of talked about this earlier. You don't have the same feedback loop from the employee that you would in a static office environment.
Yeah.
You kind of have, they'll let you know if it's not working, if it's down, and everyone knows it's down. And a lot of the networking devices themselves will tell you, hey, I'm down. I can't register. I'm not phoning in. It's the other things. It's the performance. Do you have bad wireless coverage? Are you getting signal interference? Are you overrunning a device? Do you have too many things plugged into this switch instead of that one, and so your power is getting overutilized? Or understanding how the network is performing, but maybe why it's performing poorly when it is. Do we have broadcast storms? Are we creating unnecessary loops in the network?
Mm-hmm.
Monitoring is so crucial in retail because the performance is so crucial, but you also don't get the same feedback loop, right? You kind of just get people living with it a little bit longer of, oh man, it's slow.
Yeah.
It's annoying. It's not working. You don't have that same feedback loop as you would in an office.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. As we're coming in into the end of the time here, we've talked about a lot of topics in the last 25 minutes. Anything from zero trust network access to patching to SD-WAN to SASE, Wi-Fi, LTE. Everything that we've talked about in the last 25 minutes kind of reinforces the idea that the network is really dang important for retailers. Before we part ways, anything else that you're seeing in the network and security space that we should talk about?
Well, the monitoring, we talked about monitoring the networking in the store.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more important to monitor the application performance outside of the store. What I mean by that is SD-WAN creates overlays across your different transits, right? How are those performing? We now can measure and read how is an internet link performing, and we can hold an internet carrier accountable if they're having issues in their network. How is an application performing? We have tools off of our SASE cores that we can look at how is a hosted cloud-based application performing across the public internet. And so network's always going to be the first to get blamed. You're going to have to prove innocence, the mean time to innocence. And I think understanding as applications have left the network, having those tools in place, it's not just about, we'll have more bandwidth, but the tools that SD-WAN and SASE can bring to help monitor the performance after it leaves your retail environment is crucial.
Yeah. My parting thought would be, to that end, the application and the decisions around the applications for the business, they're going to drive decisions related to network and related to security. And that's an important thing. The application should drive that decision, but you can't dismiss the importance of it. That's going to keep everything running. It is a huge attack vector that you now expose yourself to. So the importance of the network, importance of the security should be right in line with the importance of your business applications.
Yeah. You can't run your store without the network.
Yeah. No, very good. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. And until next time on the Retail Tech Revolution.
Love it.